Wonderful. Thanks, MacLean. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. We are so excited to participate in the DEI Summit. And today we want to highlight the A, also known as accessibility, in DEIA, and talk about how to advance disability inclusion in the workplace. But first, let's pause. We recognize that jumping into a topic as complex as disability may conjure a myriad of emotions and perhaps a sense of discomfort. But for the next 30 minutes, we encourage you to lean into that discomfort, embrace conversation around exclusion, ableism, and disability, and remember that all of us are learning and seeking to be better agents of change. So as MacLean mentioned, my name is Marie Trudelle. I'm the accessibility specialist at Apprenticeship. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm wearing a light blue collared shirt with earrings and have shoulder length blonde hair. I'm based in Park City, Utah. And while I have been working in accessibility for about 8 years, I have been so excited to work at this intersection of accessible technology and inclusive design in order to think about how we can leverage the potential for technology to provide more independence, choice, and participation for individuals with disabilities. And while I do not currently identify as disabled, my enthusiasm for amplifying voices within the disability community stem from my personal temporary disability, physical disability, that extended throughout my entire childhood.
Hi all, my name is Emma MacLean and I'm the Accessible Apprenticeship Program Manager at Apprenti. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman with chin-length curly brown hair with a blonde streak in the front, and I'm wearing a green sweater on the call today. I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am a chronically ill and disabled person, and I prefer identity first language, which we'll talk more about later in the presentation. As MacLean mentioned, I come to accessibility work through work with youth as a paraprofessional at a school for individuals with disabilities, as well as a camp for neurodivergent young people. And I also do work at the intersection of accessibility in arts and cultural spaces.
So our goal today is to help you better understand disability and leave with actionable steps for integrating accessibility into your workplace. We'll start by framing disability, address barriers individuals with disabilities experience in employment, and then leave you with steps for how you can bring this into your organization. So if you have questions, please add them to the chat, and Emma and I will do our best to address them.
Great. So there are a few baseline things we want to make sure to cover when talking about disability. The first of which is to define disability. So we say disability is a condition of the body or mind that affects an individual's ability to do certain life activities. Essentially, a gap between one's current abilities and the environment. Not all disabilities affect people from birth, and disabilities can be temporary, situational, or permanent. Another important thing to remember is that disability is not a dirty word. I think it is important to name disability as what it is. Disabled people are political agents and have driven that change into law, like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and into our world. When we use words like differently abled or handy capable, are we centering people with disabilities or non-disabled people's comfort? I personally don't like differently abled because it is rarely, if ever, used to describe people other than those who have a disability. LeBron James has different abilities than I do, but he likely wouldn't be described as being differently able. So while I completely agree that we do have different abilities, let's be wary of the framing and the terms that we use.
One of the reasons why we approach disability inclusion with a sense of urgency and responsibility is a result of the prevalence. 1 in 5 adults living in America identify as having a disability. That's 61 million individuals. It's the largest minority group. And since disability is a natural part of the human experience, it is a group that anyone, regardless of age, gender, race, can join at any time. So this means that individuals with disabilities also hold other identities. For example, someone may be disabled and also identify as being Black or being queer. And sometimes this magnifies the discrimination and marginalization that they might experience. Additionally, society often portrays disability as something that is fixed or permanent. You're either disabled or you're not. But in reality, many experience a temporary or even situational disability. And it may change throughout one's lifetime or even hour to hour. So when we say, if you've met one person with a disability, it means you've met one person with a disability.
Additionally, 62% of people with disabilities have non-apparent disabilities. These disabilities do not have clear external visible markers, and it's important to remember that disability doesn't look or sound a certain way. Some examples of non-apparent disabilities are ADHD, autism, PTSD, diabetes. So although we love the person in the wheelchair, that icon, it doesn't fully capture the picture of disability. Given these stats, you almost definitely work with someone with a disability, or maybe you yourself have a disability and are unsure of how to talk about it. And maybe you're worried about saying the wrong thing around them. So let's talk a little bit about disability labels. To start off, you are probably going to say the wrong thing sometimes. It happens to all of us. Throughout this presentation, we've been using both person-first and identity-first language. Depending on the individual, the disability, and a myriad of other factors, people prefer different terms when they are being referred to. If you can, check with the person to make sure that you are using the terminology that they like best. It might sound something like, hey, I've noticed that when you talk about yourself, you say, I'm a blind person. Is that the language you would like me to use when referring to you? Or is there something else that you would like me to say? Identity-first proponents think of their disability as integral to their identity. Autistic people, for example, see their autism as integral and essential. This is similar to the way that we might talk about race or ethnic identity. We wouldn't say that a person has whiteness. We would say a white person. Autistic people are not the only ones who think of their disability as integral to their identity. This is also true for capital D deaf people as well. There are some people who prefer person-first language. I've used the example on the slide of people with Down syndrome because that is a prevalent preference for this group of people. We acknowledge the person first and then their disability. Right now, person-first language is what we use when speaking generally about disabilities in writing, but that could change over time. Many people are hesitant to address disability for fear of saying the wrong thing or offending someone. But not acknowledging disability at all, we create bigger barriers for individuals because we fail to recognize or validate their lived experiences, and that has material consequences. One of those material consequences is lower employment for individuals with disabilities. This is why it is important to include accessibility in DEIA initiatives. Accessibility work can complement the DEI work that you are already doing. For example, an individual with ADHD might benefit from flexible working hours so they can work during hours of peak productivity. Flexible working hours might also benefit working parents with limited access to childcare. As we continue to see the benefits of a diversified workforce, let's continue to ask questions to see who is missing. The disability community gets ignored or sidelined due to negative or preconceived stigma. People assume that they are unqualified, unable to hold the same role as a non-disabled peer, or require lower expectations. These limiting beliefs and mindset lead to ableism.
And when we think of ableism, it can be thought of as a statement or behavior directed at a disabled person that denigrates or assumes a lesser status of the person simply because of their disability. It can be conscious or unconscious, individual or systemic. These misinformed mindsets impact nearly every barrier or challenge that an individual with a disability experiences in the workplace. For example, the assumption that a person with disability is less productive at work, or a fear that hiring someone with a disability will bring about additional legal risk to the company. These are mindsets that infiltrate American society. Additionally, some barriers to employment include inaccessible tools. And when we talk about inaccessible tools, I'm going to highlight digital platforms, such as company websites, job boards, performance review sites. They need to be WCAG compliant, and that stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So these standards ensure that everyone, including maybe someone who uses a screen reader or a switch device, can fully perceive and engage with this digital content independently. So when Emma and I started at Apprenti, we mapped out the apprentice digital journey, from registration to completing the assessment, to the interview process, offer letters, the sending and receiving of apprenticeship documentation. And we conducted an accessibility remediation to improve the user experience for everyone. And while we are still working to improve the digital accessibility of our content, it's an ongoing process, we are positioned at a spot where instead of retrofitting, we are incorporating inclusive design from the outset and have accessibility checkpoints baked into our product design. And lastly, a barrier to employment includes minimal opportunities for career development. People with disabilities are often placed in entry roles with few opportunities for upward growth. And as a result, we see fewer members of the C-suite identify as having a disability. And I think about the mantra that propelled so many advancements for the disability community that states, "Nothing about us without us." And elevating leaders with disabilities will most definitely help inform inclusive cultures and systems from the inside out.
The graph on the screen shows data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics for 2021. 19.1% of people with disabilities were employed, whereas 63.7% of people without a disability were employed. While some of this gap is accounted for by the fact that many people with disabilities are older or retired, the differential is still stark. There are many working age people with disabilities who would like to be working, but cannot find employment. Additionally, these stats do not capture all individuals who have been impacted by COVID and long COVID, which we anticipate will continue to affect the workforce for many years to come. These gaps are further exacerbated for individuals who are Black and Hispanic with disabilities who face unemployment at much higher rates than white individuals with disabilities. On the screen, you'll see it says, while 20% of individuals in the US have a disability, only 3 to 5% of individuals choose to disclose their disability at work. Due to the ableism that many people with disabilities experience in the workplace, perhaps it isn't surprising that when people with disabilities do get jobs, they don't want to disclose their disability at work. Employees with disabilities fear that disclosing will lead to outcomes such as retaliation, slower progression, and less meaningful roles. And for most, disclosing is a very personal and perhaps difficult decision, even in supportive environments. We worked with an apprentice who is a veteran who had a number of service-related disabilities. He needed some accommodations to make his home office more comfortable, but would be traveling for his work as well. We discussed the options available to make his in-person office more accessible, but he was hesitant. He informed us that any in-person accommodations would have to be as discreet and invisible as possible, as he didn't want his coworkers to think he was incompetent. It was more important for this apprentice to pass as non-disabled than to be comfortable and able to work. When it comes to disclosing a disability in the workplace, it is important for everyone to understand the rights of people with disabilities, not just disabled people. We made a document, which Marie will be dropping in the chat, to help individuals learn about and reflect on the pros and cons of disclosing.
So as we close today, we want to share steps to help you integrate accessibility into your DEI efforts. And we hope that these suggestions are relevant for both the physical and digital workplace. So I just dropped a link to the chat that outlines the importance of knowing your right when disclosing a disability. And one of the main things we want to highlight is the importance of creating an accommodation process and making that process visible, clear, and inviting. So employees should know exactly who to reach out to if they have questions about accommodations, and make sure it is clear as to the steps for what information they need to share, as well as appropriate timelines. When we make this information more visible and normalize disability, we can help create a sense of psychological safety across all of our employees. Another way to bring disability inclusion into your workspace is to provide information through multiple means of representation. And this means turning on your captions when in a virtual meeting, or sending out slides in advance of a meeting. So thinking about that, some individuals it is difficult for them to just attain information visually, and they might benefit from auditory or additional channels, such as videos. And so when we engage with apprentices, we often encourage them to think about how they can read information, watch information, act it out, as well as teach it, right? To be ensure that people are engaging with that content as best as possible. And lastly, conduct an accessible hiring audit. So we looked at our job descriptions for apprentices, and a lot of times job descriptions might include a phrase that states something like, individual must lift 50 pounds. But if someone's working from home, you're discriminating against this individual with a disability. And we also crafted a human-centered interview process in efforts to create an equitable, respectful, values-based hiring process where outcomes are not predictable based off of someone's identity or characteristics, but something that we can share with hiring managers and really challenge some of the biases that they might hold prior to interviewing all candidates.
So in closing, we want to share that disability is diversity and inclusion is intentional, and it's going to start with mindset. Disability needs to be part of your diversity and equity equation. People with disabilities can bring innovation and creative problem solving to your organization. Deaf people advocated for closed captions to be available on video technology, and now 85% of videos watched on Facebook are watched without sounds and utilize captions. Accessibility improvements for one group of people helped make videos accessible for many more. You work with people with disabilities right now, and accessible work environments benefit more than just people with disabilities. There's no reason for access not to be considered in your DEIA endeavors. If disability is defined as a gap between one's ability and the built environment, then inclusion is the responsibility of all of us to close that gap where possible. It doesn't need to happen all at once, and you won't be able to create an environment that's completely and totally accessible to everyone at all times. But we need to start somewhere so that disabled people can be in the room with us and to help make the world more accessible. For our final slide, here is our contact information. If you'd like to learn more about the work that we do, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we'll also share a flyer with some key points about accessibility in the chat. Additionally, at this time, if there are any questions, we are more than happy to answer those.
Yes, thank you so much, Emma and Marie, for sharing those, wonderful points for us all to consider as we move forward in our DEI strategy and planning, and really incorporating ability, disability, accessibility into the work that we do as part of DEI. Since we have a little bit of time before the next presentation, I was wondering perhaps if you could kind of walk us through some of the key points that you have in that document that you're sharing as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the document outlines a little bit about kind of the business case for why people with disabilities are an asset to your staff, and focus on some of the things that we touched on earlier. So people with disabilities are often extremely creative and innovative, as they may often find themselves in inaccessible spaces and having to navigate those and come up with interesting solutions. So that's often a huge asset to teams, especially in the tech space, where we're constantly moving into new areas where we haven't operated before. So that can be a huge asset. Marie, do you want to share any other points from that?
Yeah, I was just pulling it up to see if we could do a screen share.
Oh, perfect.
One moment.
Lots of great feedback on chat. Folks really wanting to get your presentation after this session.
Please feel free to reach out to us after this presentation. We would be more than happy to connect with you and share slides and things like that. I will drop our emails in the chat again while Marie shares a little bit more about this flyer.
Yeah, so Emma mentioned that one of the benefits of hiring individuals with disability is increasing your company's creative capacity. As individuals with disabilities are always thinking about alternative ways to execute daily tasks. And I would say another benefit is when we go back to the beginning of our presentation, we shared a stat that 1 in 5 adults in America have a disability, and that the disclosure rate is only 3 to 5%. And so when we start to normalize disability and make that more visible in the workplace, it can help other individuals who might already be at your organization, but might not know that the accommodation process exists or even what's possible, that they might be able to benefit from that and actually, as a result, be more productive or be able to work with a greater sense of ease, proficiency, and independence. And something that we have found very interesting throughout our time at Apprenti is as we meet with apprentices, individuals are often very they have a lot of questions around accommodations of what's possible. Some may have received a disability diagnosis when they were in high school, and the accommodation was simply extra time for an exam. Or some have recently left the military and have a disability, but it's a new space that they are trying to navigate. And so in our conversations with apprentices, we seek to ask questions and identify where they're experiencing friction, where some of these barriers to participation might be happening, and then work with them to provide some suggestions or potential accommodations and always provide them with choice and option. But in order to really start thinking more expansively as to what accommodation includes.
Absolutely. There was a question in the chat about what are some things an organization can do to encourage and support self-disclosure. So I think there are many things that an organization can do. One is to make the accommodations process as clear and easy as possible, and for individuals to understand what will happen when they start to engage in that process. Many people are afraid to come forward for fear of penalization or ostracization by their workforce. And so having a clear understanding of what the interactive accommodation process will look like can help encourage people to want to come forward. Another possibility is to implement accessible processes without needing a person with a disability to request them. So what I mean by that is making it a norm to turn on captions when having a virtual meeting, or always sending out slides in advance, or starting meetings by asking, are everyone's access needs being met? And if not, what can we do to meet those needs? Those commitments show people with disabilities that accessibility is important and a value of the organization, and may lead individuals to want to bring more of that part of themselves to their work environment.
Yeah, as Emma mentioned, we seek to raise the standard of accessibility across the entire organization, but also recognize, because everyone can benefit from that, but then also recognize that we need accommodations and to create an individual accommodation process, because everyone is different, and we need to be able to adjust and modify as needed.
It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And so being available for the unique things that are happening for each individual is also really important. That's a way that we lead our conversations with apprentices, is by saying, everyone is unique, and so we can't just provide you a list of accommodations. Instead, let's talk about what the barriers for you are right now at work and how we can eliminate those barriers. I think by opening it up in that way, people don't feel like they have a magic answer that they're not able to reach, but instead understand that the process is truly interactive and may shift and change over time. I think there is a pervasive myth that if someone doesn't disclose a disability, say on hiring papers, that they can't request an accommodation later on. So again, sharing that information and knowledge with your employees can help promote individuals seeking accommodations, disclosing, sharing their disability at work. If we understand that the nature of disability is ever changing, and it isn't a one-size-fits-all. If there are any other questions, I think people can feel free to reach out to us. If not, MacLean, thank you so much for having us on this panel today. It was really a joy to be part of this conversation.